some welding and cutting coming up. Welcome back to Kevin's Trooper channel. This is day 2 of the welding cart build. Yesterday we got almost the entire lower shelf finished, and today we're going to try to do the upper shelf and the handles. Okay, so the first thing that I'm doing this morning is I'm laying out how high and tall and wide I want this second shelf to be. And one of the things that I always like to do whenever I'm doing a measurement like this is I'll fold my tape measure to the same size as what I'm building this for. So in other words, the welder is 16.5 tall. So I'll take this to about 17 and bend it, and then I can kind of visualize how high my welder is going to be and how it's going to look in here. So my welder is going to be something like this. And I can say, okay, well, let's see, I can probably start my second shelf right about here. So I'm going to make this back leg somewhere around 24. And that way my welder will sit like this. And if I do make it 24 and I ever get a different welder, this should still work. Okay, here's where we're at. I'm trying to get this 100% square with the shelf, but the table it's sitting on is not level. So I've propped from some different thick blocks underneath this to make sure that the shelf is level first, and then I put my magnets on there and I'm putting my magnetic level to make sure everything is level and square. And then you give it the eyeball test. And I think that looks pretty good. Alright, I have my 2 end pieces of angle iron cut. Now I'm going to take the plasma cutter and cut our 2 sides out. We'll do that little notch where we can 45 these angle irons together. These things right here are a must-have if you're going to do a project like that. Called Swanson Speed Square. Now I've got my welder turned down pretty far from this for this, so I can just lay a little tack in there and not burn through anything, or that way I can build it up a little bit if I need to build it up a little. Alright, take 2. Hold it by this right here. Is that easier? If any of it doesn't come off, we'll hit it with the grinder. There you go. Good job, man. All right.
Did I do a good job?
You did an awesome job, man. Okay guys, what I'm working on now, this is a storage box that's going to go behind the plasma cutter. The plasma cutter is going to sit here on the top shelf, and this is going to be a little storage box in the back where I can throw goggles or whatever I need to. Pretty thin metal, so I'm having to just touch here and there, but I'm going to try to build a little storage box, and that way I'll always have somewhere to throw stuff, but got to be a little careful with it, it's thin. It's always best to have 2 layers of eye protection if you can. It's hard today because these are fogging up so bad because it's so humid in Louisiana that as soon as I put these on, because they have the rubber gasket, they fog up almost instantly. You can see they're fogging up now. But if you can, it's always best to have 2 layers. On this flux core wire, what happens is after every weld, you end up with a little bead of silicone on the end of your wire. So it's my habit to, before I begin to weld again, I'll just break that end off and throw it in a pile and put me some fresh wire. Because this wire is hollow. It has the flux core. It's like the reverse of a welding rod. The flux is on the inside. It's hollow wire, and you want a nice fresh wire every time that you get started. So it's always my habit to just break it off and start fresh every time I begin a new weld. And I'm going to put links to this Lincoln Handy Core in the description if you want to take a look at that. It's been a pretty good beginning welder. I'm ready to step up. Like I said on the last video, I'm stepping up to something a little more powerful. But you know, this was great for what it's done so far, and it's not very expensive at all to get into welding. You don't have to have an argon tank and all that. You plug it into a 110 and you're welding. I built the whole bumper with this thing. Well, it's coming together, guys. On this grinder, I really prefer a grinder that, turn that welder off. I really prefer a grinder that has a trigger instead of one that has a thumb release. And the reason why is if I'm running this grinder and something goes wrong and I drop it, it's gonna shut off. Or in an emergency, I can just let off and it's gonna stop. With a thumb switch like this, once you turn it on, it's on. So if it falls or you drop it or it goes flying across the room, it's still going to be running. So I have both. I really prefer the one that has the trigger release. And guys, I've had this Porter cable. This is a pretty cheap grinder. I've had this thing for years and I have put this grinder through hell. It actually costs quite a bit less than like your Makitas or your DeWalt's, but it has been a great grinder, this Porter cable. I'll go back and see if I can find a link to this exact one, and I'll put it in on the comments for you guys. But if you're looking for an inexpensive grinder, this is really a good one. I love this Porter cable. I can't believe it's still running after what I've put it through. Well, we have both shelves pretty much finished. I have just a little bit of cleanup left to do, but they're pretty much done. These corners, getting down in these corners to get that cleaned up in there is a little bit hard. You got to do some of that by hand. You know, you're trying to get a round grinder into a 90-degree corner. That doesn't really work. But it's getting close. We are close to being done with this thing. All right, now I'm going to start cutting out the 4 legs that connect the top and bottom layers for the plasma cutter and for the welder on bottom. We're going to cut the legs out. We'll weld them up and stick this thing together. I'm not worrying too much about the exact length. I didn't sit and mark them and everything because I want them about 24. As long as they're equal, it doesn't matter. It's just going to change the height a ½ inch. That doesn't matter. But as long as the back 2 and the front 2 are the same length, that's all that matters on this. Okay, I started putting the legs onto the design. And I think I got the front legs way too tall. I don't need quite this much of an angle at the top in the plasma cutter. So I'm going to take my cutoff wheel and cut these down about 4 inches. And that's going to give me a nice sloping curve here so that the plasma cutter angles up a little, but not too much. I had it way too much. So real simple fix. I'm just going to slice that off with the angle grinder and I'll be right back in business. from the table down here to the floor to try to get this equal here on both sides. I had a very hard time grinding these two pieces off equal where this would set level. But I got it perfect, so I didn't want to touch it. I just ran my extension cord, moved my welder in a little, and now I'm going to tack it and I'll be good with it. A couple of things to think about whenever you guys go to change your welding wire. I'm using the Inner Shield NR211 MP from Lincoln. Now, if you're using flux cord wire and it does not have this MP designation on it, that stands for multiple pass, which means if that says SP, I think it is, you can't weld over a previous pass. You can only put one bead onto the metal and you can't go over the top of it. But with this, the MP means the wire's designed to do multiple passes over the same joint. And this one's real simple to change. Now we're just going to pull this off, and we're going to take a little pair of needle nose pliers and see if we can get this old wire out. And what I like to do is try to push it forward and then pull my wire out the tip so it always goes the same direction. And it's about time for a new tip. And you want to be very careful that this doesn't unroll and spring everywhere on you. And what I've found as well is if you don't get all this paper out of this hole, sometimes it can make your paper a little too tight and you'll have trouble getting it to roll. So we're just going to slide this on, and we're going to put our cap back on with our locking ring, and then I'm going to start threading the wire. And sometimes you have to fight with it just a little bit. Now with flux core wire, you want to make sure that your tensioner is not so tight that it crushes the wire. And we're through. One quick tip, guys, when you're welding, you want to make sure that the edge of your shirt does not have a little void like that. I've had that happen to me a few times, and I've had blisters in one little spot because I would be welding and my shirt would have a little open spot like that. See how that's kind of open? You got to make sure that shirt stays tucked way up in there. Back to the project. Okay, here's where I'm at. I've got my two pieces of angle iron in here for my shelf. This is going to be a shelf for electrodes. So I'm going to put a piece of flat stock on here, and then we'll put some sides. This is the front, so that I can slide electrodes in here, and my welder will be right here. We'll have some hooks on the side to hang the hose. It's going to be really a nice system. So I'm going to cut out this piece of flat stock and lay it in here using the plasma cutter. Let's see how this fits. Perfect. Man, I got that one perfect the first try. That's the first time so far. I'm still getting a little bit of blowback on these cuts, and the reason it's doing that is I can't get a real smooth drag. It'll kind of jump forward when it drags, and then it does, it moves a little too fast in that one spot, so it's blowing back. Still got a little bit of work to do on that. You know, I just need a little more practice to see how to get that nice smooth drag. I don't know if I'm hitting something on the metal that's like a piece of splatter or something. I don't know. I'm going to have to work on it a little more. All right, back to welding. I think I figured out what I was doing on that one, YouTube. I was holding my gun at some kind of weird angle. That time I held it perpendicular to the work surface here. And I think that made more difference, guys. Yeah, there's a lot less dross, and it cut much smoother. Just need more practice to figure out all the little details. Here is our electrode shelf. Very nice. Well guys, I'm tired. I'm gonna call that part 2. I'm gonna call it a day. I've been out here all day, but I'm super excited with the way it turned out and the progress that I got done. It is turning out great. You can see I got the shelf all finished. I stuck my plasma cutter up here just to kind of see how it was gonna look, and it's great. It fits up there perfect. I still have to put some hooks to hold all of our hoses and wires. But other than that, we're gonna be painting this thing pretty soon. So I'm gonna call this the end of part 2. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our great group of guys that we have here on the channel, and gals. And give me a thumbs up, because you know it means a lot to me. Thank you guys. We'll see you in the next video.